All right. Well, I will go ahead and kick us off. I am serving a dual role tonight. I am the director of speaker engagement here, so I typically lead the facilitation, but I'm also your speaker tonight. So it's going to be a bit of the Laura show. I apologize in advance, but I'm hoping it's going to be helpful for everyone. So, good evening, everyone. I am so thrilled that you joined us for our Monday evening speaker series for our session tonight, From Public to Private, Mastering Your Career Transition. I know that there is a lot of restructuring happening in the federal government, and as a professional career counselor and someone that myself is a government contractor, I've seen a lot of movement. So I'm really happy I can present on this timely topic. But for those that don't know me, my name is Laura Koepsell. I am the Director of Speaker Engagement and tonight's speaker. 40 Plus of Greater Washington is a 70-year-old nonprofit organization. They used to be all over the country, and we're actually one of the last one or two chapters in the country. So it's very exciting that we get to support the 40 plus job seekers of the world. And our mission is to help experienced professionals know and confidently communicate their value in securing a new position or changing careers. As many of you already know, we do that through a range of programs like this evening speaker series. If you're looking for a way to keep your skills sharp and enhance your resume, you also can consider volunteering here at 40 Plus of Greater Washington. There are many great opportunities. This is a great place to look if you're looking to work on skill gaps, maybe get more experience on your resume, have something current. So consider volunteering with us. That is a great opportunity. If you go to our website, click on the support tab, and there is an option to register if you would like to volunteer. Occasionally, we receive and post job announcements from regional job centers, different employers that see 40 Plus as a valuable recruitment tool. So I would urge you to also periodically check out our career portal on the 40 Plus website. And finally, if you want to be alerted to new content or check out previous sessions, make sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell on our YouTube channel. There is a ton of fantastic content that our king of IT, Gaddafi, chops up into bite-sized pieces. So I highly recommend checking that out. There's a lot of good tips and tricks on there. And now that those announcements are out of the way, I would like to welcome this evening's speaker, myself. I'm going to do my actual introduction in just a moment, so I'm not going to read through the bio. But as I'm getting this set up, feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time during this presentation. There is no question that is too small, so go ahead and write it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, or raise your hand at any point, and I will check in periodically to see if there's questions as well. So don't be shy. So I'm going to kick us off. Again, our session tonight is From Public to Private, Mastering Your Career Transition. My name is Laura Koepsell. I am a certified career counselor and have my own career counseling business. I am from the DC area, Northern Virginia specifically, born and raised here. So I have an exceptionally large network in the DC area, especially. I started my business in 2018, and I've been doing career counseling for about 9 years. So I've really kept a pulse check, especially on the DC market. And I have been a federal contractor for 2 agencies, actually even currently. So I'm very close to the situation, watching a lot of contracts end, federal careers end, and it is devastating to watch, but I want to be able to provide that support to those of you that are considering what is next. Do you want to go the private sector temporarily? Do you want to go into a nonprofit? Do you want to go full-time? I'll help you explore those options and see how to best translate your experience into that sector. So this session will help you to better translate government experience into transferable sector skills and expertise for private or nonprofit, understand hiring trends, best practices, and growth industries in the private sector, learn about possible upskilling opportunities to stand out amongst applicants, and gain access to valuable resources. I will be, after this, sending out the PowerPoint as well as a handout with different resources, and Gaddafi will be posting this on YouTube in the next week or two. So some context setting. There is obviously an increase in federal employees and contractors moving to the private sector, whether because their position was fully cut, they took the DRP, there's going to be some upcoming rifts, and some people that just said, I don't want to live in this chaos of not knowing if my job is stable, I want to head out. All of which completely valid. So there is more people looking at the private sector, especially in the DMV area, but it is taking place all around the country. For the hiring process, I'm sure many of you that have seen the Fed experience have known that that is a very slow process. Private sector works a lot faster in the hiring. It typically can take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to get fully through the interview process, paperwork processed, hired. So it mostly just depends on if there's a lot of negotiation back and forth, but it moves pretty quickly. There's also more of a focus on results rather than tenure. And the government, they love people that are career feds. They want to see you continuing to stay in the government. You know how it works. Private sector, they think it's cool you worked in the government, but they want to know what results you're bringing to the table. How are you going to make their lives easier? How have you proven success? What evidence do you have of that success in achieving results? That's what they want to know about. And that includes the interview process. In government, you see a lot of structured interviews. In private sector, it is kind of a variety of standard and behavioral, as well as some technical interviews or potentially some assessments they may have you work on. So the process is a little different. And then it is more important now than ever to be extremely adaptable. At this point, knowing that there is a lot of uncertainty, it is more important to focus on preparation rather than planning. We love to plan, we love to figure out what's next, and unfortunately, the greatest laid plans typically do not work out because there are unknown factors that pop up constantly, such as this current year. So with that, I think it's important to know how you can prepare for the next sector you want to go into, building up these transferable skills, being open to pivoting if necessary, and focus on that to build up your skill set rather than planning what is the immediate next step and what should be in 10 years. Try to build it up in more of a fuzzy goal style. So I'm sure that's something that sounds kind of obvious, but it's more important than ever to emphasize that adaptability. So there are a lot of transferable skills that we are constantly saying. You're hearing transferable skills and you may think, what even is that? So these are skills that are related to a variety of industries and topics. So here's a couple examples of federal skills and what transferable skill equivalent is there. So if you did a lot of policy analysis in your job, you have business strategy and regulatory compliance experience. Program or project management, you have operations, potentially product management, account management, easy. Procurement and contracts. Some of these you may also see in the private sector, but this just gives you more word choices and areas to potentially pursue. So procurement and contracts could look like vendor management or supply chain. Data and analysis and reporting, business intelligence and market research. Public affairs and communications, that could look like corporate communications or PR. And HR, workforce development or training could lead to talent acquisition or learning and development. So these are both skills as well as sectors that you can lean on. So if you have any of these and you're thinking, I don't know where to go next, these are a couple options to get you started. Here, I have a master list of common transferable skills. I won't read through them all, but I just want to point out a couple like Agile and Scrum methodologies. That is fantastic, and especially the tech sector, which is one of the sectors growing the fastest. So those are project management skills based in technology. There's also skills like writing. I know that seems very basic, but that is the number one thing I hear from employers in the private and nonprofit sector. They say people can't write. And you all have the experience of having writing experience in numerous capacities. You may have experience with white papers, writing briefs, writing summaries, writing memos, maybe writing letters on behalf of executives, maybe doing presentations for executive councils and things like that. So that writing experience is extremely valuable. That is something I absolutely recommend highlighting. And a lot of these things you probably have too, like even CRM software. That might be something like you've been tracking things on Excel. Maybe some of you have already used Salesforce, but if you have anything, you're tracking customer relationship management, just customer info of who you've talked to, that is considered CRM. So I want to emphasize that you should list that on your resume if you feel like you have it, but not the Salesforce directly. So some job market trends. The first is that it claims right now, and that's partially because unemployment numbers were last tracked February 14th, which means that right now it's a little bit skewed in terms of what is the current unemployment in growth sectors. So right now, there's sectors that are growing, especially which is tech, AI, healthcare, management, utilities, and wholesale trade. In the DC area, especially, it is primarily the tech industry that's growing quite fast. And that doesn't mean you need to be a tech expert. It just means that there's more opportunities that would be included there. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. My dog is barking. Okay, sorry. So unemployment rate right now, it's at 5%, which is technically below the long-term average of 7.18%, but in the DC area, it was at about 4.81% prior. So it has been growing. And the hard part about these numbers too is that if you live in Virginia and you work in DC, then the numbers don't equate to each other. So there's a lot of skewed numbers, especially in the DMV, about what unemployment looks like right now. Like I mentioned, tech sector is growing quite fast. So it's actually doubling in job growth compared to other sectors. And of course, there's a very high demand for AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity skills. With AI, it doesn't mean that you need to be an absolute expert in AI, but if you've used it, if you're a ChatGPT regular, that does not hurt to have that on your materials, to know that you know how to use the platform and how to make it work smarter for you. Some key employers are Google, Capital One, Amazon. They always like to mention, but I will say I've seen quite a few layoffs from there. They are known to have more layoffs than normal. So that's just one to keep a grain of salt with. And then in-demand skills and roles, anything tech related like Python, TensorFlow, PyTorch, machine learning and automation, those will always be popular. But again, if you're not into tech heavy careers, that does not mean that you are unable to get a job. Tech companies still have HR, they still have administrative assistants, they still have business operations, business development. So there's still a lot of opportunities. If you're trying to look for a full pivot and you're wondering, what should I consider? This is a good area to look in. This will always be a necessary need. Like right now, software engineers, AI engineers, and cloud architects are all massively growing in the DC area. So if you've ever thought about tech, now is a good time to think about it a little bit harder. And remote work trends, right now, there's still about 71% of companies that are offering permanent remote options. I will say right now, in the DC area, it is especially oversaturated with people that are actively job searching, competitive applicants. So with remote jobs, there's a couple websites entirely dedicated to remote jobs, but I also would look at places that are located maybe in California, in Chicago, in New York, that are remote opportunities because there won't be as many people going after them. If there's anything DC area that's either remote or hybrid, those will be more popular than normal. So just keep in mind, and even if you work at a job in California, they don't necessarily have you work California hours. You could probably work East Coast hours most of the time. But if not, we're the lucky ones where you get to start work a little later. So, there are some added benefits. So before I dive into kind of the growth industries, do I have any questions that I can answer for folks? Doing a quick pulse check. All right, excellent. Well, we will continue forth. So, like I mentioned, the growth industries being tech, some consulting, healthcare, cybersecurity, finance, and nonprofit. With AI, sustainability, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and ESG consulting are mostly growing. I will say with consulting, there is one trend I want to make note of. If you're a government contractor, right now we're seeing that if you're like, let's say you work at Accenture and you're working on a government contract with the treasury and they cut it. Instead of in the past where they just bench you to put you on another project, they're typically just letting the employee go entirely. So while we're in this current mix, I would not recommend highly considering government contract companies unless they have a strong private sector portfolio. But in Republican administrations, historically, they always tend to farm out more work to contracting companies. So even though they're doing a lot of cancellations right now, Fed employees are losing their jobs, I do foresee a rise in government contracts in about 6-ish months when the dust kind of settles and they realize, oh, we don't have enough employees to do the work that we need to get done. So if you do want to consider government contracting, just know it's going to be a couple months delay before I highly recommend you considering it, but it will revive itself. And then resources for industry research. In addition to just informational interviews, which is one of my most recommended pieces, there's also Glassdoor, where you can look at companies and see reviews on them, interviews, salaries that people have listed. So that's a great place for if you're about to interview. LinkedIn Insights has some options. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, and industry-specific job boards. So I do see a question, is age discrimination something to be concerned about? That is something that some employers may utilize job discrimination. They're not supposed to, but it does tend to happen. It usually is about when you turn like 52, 55 that you start to see it more, just that I've seen historically. But like I said, technically it's not something they're legally allowed to do, but there are some ways to get past it. And a couple of those ways I'll go over in more depth, but that includes things like creating a functional resume rather than a traditional one, where you focus more on groups of skills as opposed to specific jobs, the duration of when you were there, and having that be the main focus. The other are little tricks like your email. There's some things like if you have an email that is AOL, Yahoo, Hotmail, anything essentially that's not Gmail or Outlook, people automatically, it doesn't matter what age you are, they automatically assume you're older. And that is just a point that I've seen consistently. So right now, if you are using any of those other ones that is not Gmail or Outlook, I recommend you create a new email address that is specifically for the job search. It can be one you just use for that, but that will save you from a lot of just unknown bias that people are looking at. So that is a great question. Is it considered acceptable to reach out to the person who last held the position you're applying for to ask about workplace culture, etc.? That is a great question. I think I would almost recommend it be someone else that isn't that person, just in case they left in either a bad blood capacity, maybe they were let go, maybe they didn't leave on their own accord. So it does depend if you know them personally or you have a direct connection, maybe you've interviewed with them. I know when I worked at CSIS, I was part of the interview process for my replacement. And I was very honest about here's the standard workplace culture, like here's what we're thinking, but that isn't always common. So I would recommend probably talking to someone else that's maybe on a similar team or enough in the company mix that they would be able to speak about it without necessarily being the last person to hold the position. So that is an excellent question. Okay. So we're now going to dive into the revamping your resume for the private sector because I know a lot of you are dealing with like a 10-page plus resume, which that's okay. Everyone's dealing with the same thing, but there is a way to get past it. So first, let's talk about shortening a federal resume. Whether you are a contractor or federal contract or federal employee or contractor, you probably have a quite lengthy resume. So I'm going to use the example of 10 plus. So I don't want you to try to go from 10 pages to 1 page, just all in one sitting, because I promise you it feels like an impossible task and you will burn yourself out. So I recommend doing it in 3 phases. The first being reduce it from 10 pages to 5 to 7 pages. Start to cut that out. That's probably one of the biggest ones you're going to do. So once you get past that hurdle, you are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I promise. Next, you're going to cut it down to 3 to 4 pages, and this will be both through a variety of you doing this on your own, get a friend as a second set of eyes, use career counselors like me, people that you know in your network that can also check it out. Then you'll reduce it to 3 to 4 pages, and finally into a 1 to 2 page private sector resume. If you have a master's degree or more than, I believe it's like 12 to 14 years of experience, you can go to 2 pages. That is okay. If there is a reason you need to go to 3 pages, I think it depends on your industry. If you're looking at nonprofit, academia, NGO, something in that capacity, it's okay if you're kind of leaning 3 pages. If you're going classic corporate, a big company like a Microsoft, a Capital One, keep it at 1 page whenever possible. They do not have the patience and they may not even flip it if it's a physical printout. So just keep that in mind. 1 to 2 pages is ultimately the goal here. So any questions on the shortening the resume piece? Okay, I'm going to dive into a couple more differences here. So government versus private sector, obviously government, they encourage it to be long. They want you to put everything you've ever done and every detail about it. So, and it's really a focus on more duties as opposed to massive successes and results. There usually is a small section for that, but that's the main focus. Private sector, they want concise, achievement oriented and focus on results. So for all of your sentences, you want it to be what happened, what you did, and the result. So you could say like transformed SOPs into a streamlined process online in order to create a main area for everyone to get training. Or you could say that you did something like you were able to cut a process time down by 8% by adding in this streamlined portion, resulting in over 100 hours of time saved. Something along those lines. Some of it you may have to guess and estimate on your own. I will say, as long as you're not doing an outrageous estimate, something that is massively different, there's no way for them to really fact check it. So if it's a number that you feel like, I don't have that, I'm just going to have to guess, feel free to guess. As long as it's somewhat in the ballpark, that's fine. Just don't say that you brought in $12 million and it was really 100,000. As long as you're doing that, you're okay. Note that there's always going to be jargon to remove. For government to private, you're really going to have to basically dumb down your resume. They don't know what a lot of these position titles mean within the government. They don't know certain executive orders that you may be working with. Even though it's technically public information, that just doesn't compute for them. They have no idea what it means. So make note in your first pass through your resume of acronyms, executive orders, government specific software, or anything like job titles that may just not be obvious. Also convert GS level roles to industry standard titles. That's one thing I've seen across the government is that you have titles that do not properly represent the work that you do. It might just be programmer two. That can mean anything. So as long as you give your references a heads up, if it's part of your current position title, switch it to something that would relate more to what you're looking for, but is still an accurate representation. Instead of programmer, you could do like data architect or senior data architect. Instead of program analyst, you could say like operations and policy specialist. So just change it to be something that makes more sense. That is completely acceptable and common. Next is types of resumes. So like I mentioned, a functional resume is sometimes helpful, but the standard mix is reverse chronological. This is the standard one, most recent to least recent experience. This is the best for stable work history or ones where you have a pretty natural path, like it's a classic career path. If you're someone that's jumped around to a lot of different industries, you may have had breaks and things like that. Sometimes a functional resume is slightly easier. So the functional is more of a focus on the skills over job titles. So you'll do a section on the skills grouped into categories that cover your entire career. Then underneath, just for the ATS process, which I'll explain momentarily, you'll just list the job titles, companies, and timeline you were there. So just keep it there just so it's there, but the main focus will be the skills. And then hybrid is a mix of both. So I'll show you a few examples that you can do a variety of. And then lastly, this is the email thing I gave you the tip of: Yahoo, AOL, Hotmail, iCloud. Just go ahead and Gmail or Outlook. Those are the two safest. People will unintentionally age you. Even if you are a super young person, they will automatically assume you're older. So that is just one thing to note. Is I think that is more than worth it. I have seen people get rejected for some really embarrassing usernames as well as just older ones just because of that false assumption. So I'm now going to go into the different types of resumes, what they'll look like. So the first, like I said, traditional / reverse chronological resume. This is your classic format. So it's most recent to least recent, 1 to 2 pages, and the typical sections it includes is a professional summary. This is optional, but I do think if you're pivoting to a new industry, this is a really good thing to include because you can highlight more of the transferable skill keywords, something about the number of years of experience in that industry. So I do think that's a good thing to keep for pivots. The next is work experience, technical skills, honors and awards. This can be good if you're someone that's gotten a lot of awards at work. I will say federal government does quite a few different ones, and they're not always obvious to private sector. You have STAR awards, you have SPOT awards, you have mission achievement awards, you have just service awards in general. So for that, just make sure that you do a quick description of what it is, or else they'll think I have no idea what that is. I see. Sorry, I just saw this message, the crosswalking positions. Can you explain that question a little bit more? Do you mean just how you can readjust the language to something private sector?
Yes, that's right.
Great question. So with that, I think the biggest thing that you're going to be looking at is some of these transferable skills. So when you're looking through a private sector resume or a job description, you want to first focus on what are the verbs that they're using in every single bullet point of the job description. Usually the first 5 or so bullet points are the most important parts of that job because they're top of mind for them. So if they are using like executed instead of implemented, start to use the word executed. If they're using data-driven decision making instead of executive leadership decisions, use that kind of terminology. So some of it's just quickly tossing that in and out. The other would be if there's any technical skills that you feel like you know that general platform type, like you know a CRM system, but you don't know Salesforce specifically, still list CRM system on your resume to show that you know it, or you can optionally take a really quick course in something like Salesforce on Udemy. Doesn't mean you need to be an expert, just enough to say that you've seen what the layout of the dashboard looks like, because most of these will have to do training. And the other is sometimes it's really simplifying it with your public sector. Usually you do a lot of details of you prepared reporting for the deputy director of X in order to produce X based on X legislation. This one, they more so want to see, again, like what happened, the action you took, and the results. So if there's any things that seem more duty-like, it's not really as impactful. You could take it or leave it. It's a repetitive one from multiple jobs. Cut those. You can leave it once in certain jobs. Don't use that precious space to mention it multiple times unless it's very relevant to the job. So, like I said, focus more on the evidence-based where you can provide a quantifier or some type of like help to company with a merger, whatever it might be. Especially public government, I think you can talk about things like adapting during times of change. You can talk about time management, multitasking, cross-departmental collaboration, even if that's within your own agency, that still counts because it's so large. And even include things like the number of people at the agency that you were doing work with. So those are some quantifiers and things you can add in. So just take out the really significant in nitty-gritty details of projects you've done and keep it a little higher level and focus on the results, even if you weren't the one that directly produced the results. If your work was part of it, that still counts. So, and I'll go through a little bit more, but that's just kind of a taste of ways you can edit that. Oh, good. I'm so glad that was helpful. Perfect. So, like I was saying with reverse chronological standard format here, if you do use a template online, there's one thing I just want to warn you of. Do not do a 2-column resume. 2-column resumes, like if it's a table in there or you just list it as 2 columns, it cannot be read by ATS systems. That is the applicant tracking system. That is what most companies use to take in all of the applications. Larger companies use this religiously to filter out which candidates to actually consider. So if you have a 2-column resume, all the words get mushed together and it can't be read. So just note, don't do that version. So my one takeaway. I'll go deeper into the ATS systems, but I just wanted to give that heads up. So functional resume, it won't actually be colorful. This is just to show you the different sections. It's still about 1 to 2 pages, but like I said, it focuses more on grouped skills. And this is great for senior level professionals or people with more diverse career paths to focus the attention more so in how the skills build off each other. So it includes usually a professional summary and then a relevant skills / expertise section broken up into areas. So you can do customer service, sales, merchandising. You could do project management and leadership. You could do project management or maybe something like report writing and analysis, maybe data visualizations and reporting, something along those lines, budgeting. So whatever seems important to the types of industry you're going after, I would even use a platform like ChatGPT and say, can you tell me based on this job description, what are the top 4 categories of skills I should focus on if I was creating a functional resume? And it will spit it out for you. So sometimes you can work smarter, not harder with things like that. But based on the jobs you're pursuing, I'd probably do 1 or 2 different functional resumes that would relate to that position. So it's just enough that you have basically a skeleton document ready. So with that, like I mentioned, you're going to add in for each of these skills, summarize bullet points of your relevant work experience to that area across your whole career. You don't need to necessarily list it was at this specific job unless it's relevant, but you can say like managed over $800 billion worth of contracts over a 20-year career through blah, blah, blah. So it can be, like quantifiers that are added up throughout the years, but that's how you'd want to list it. And then you'll list out your professional experience. Don't do it in this way like it shows, just do it straight down. Just list your job, your company, and the timeline you worked there just to get through that ATS system. Education and technical skills. This is important to separate out if you're doing something that is technology heavy or you extra want to emphasize it because there's a lot of technical requirements in the job. If it's just a couple minor ones, you probably can include it in this section, but that's just something to note. I typically like to see it separated out because it's easier for a recruiter to read quickly. That's kind of the thing to keep in mind with this is that a recruiter is looking at your resume an average of 7 to 10 seconds. So you want to make sure that it is easy to read, the main points are there, and that you can have someone that is totally not in your industry look at it and get a decent grasp for who you are as a candidate. So have your friend that's in a totally different industry take a look, and if they say, my eyes glazed over, I couldn't focus, or everything is smushed together, there's not enough white space, that's great feedback to take into consideration. So you want it to be easy to read, easy to understand for you as an applicant within 7 to 10 seconds. So hybrid resume, like I mentioned, this is a combination of both traditional, like reverse chronological and functional. So you can do it based in order. So this is just a quick example. It's not going to be on a black page. I just took a screenshot when I was in night mode, but it'll still be 1 to 2 pages. You usually include a professional summary. You can include industries and fields of expertise if you just want some hot keywords, industries that you want to make sure are obvious. Employment history, that's just again your classic title or like position title, company timeline. And then experience and skills that can be underneath it. That is the functional area. So it's just slightly reordered. You maybe will include some slight context here, but it's kind of a combo of the two. And like I said, technical skills, honors and awards, certifications and courses, education. Those are kind of the standard categories. If you're someone that has a heavy writing career, you've done a lot of publications, maybe you're in academia, that should be a section as well. So just keep those in mind that sometimes you need some additional ones depending on your industry. So that is the hybrid resume. Before I dive into LinkedIn, are there any questions about any of these resume formats? Okay, excellent. And like I said, don't be shy to put it in the chat. Kay, go on ahead.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, it, part of the thing about being old is you do have a long history with a whole lot of stuff in it. Do
Mhm.
you have to list every single place you've been employed, or can you just highlight where you spent most of your time?
That is an amazing question. You do not need to put everything. If you had an internship 30 years ago, you don't need to list it. Typically, it's about 10 years back. I would say anything before the year 2000, you probably don't need to list.
That leads to my second question, because if what you did before the year 2000, so I'll just talk about myself. So I'm going to be 25 in federal
Mhm.
come July. But prior to that, I was actually in private industry, and I did corporate sales and account management for like a publishing company. So um there are definitely skills that are applicable or can be used for that.
That is a really good point. I think if you have that kind of experience, especially if you're trying to go to private, I almost would do a section where you can do public experience and you list out some of the federal ones, and then you can do a separate section that's private sector experience and list out some of those. Or the other one is you can just list a few positions at the bottom that have different timelines, but the ones, even if they were in the wrong order, the ones that had more history, feel free to write those out with bullet points, and the jobs that you feel like don't matter as much, you can just list out as the title and the company and timeline if
Mhm.
it's close enough in length for timeline.
Okay, and then finally, sorry, the last question is, I know this sounds silly, but if you have a hobby where there might be interesting skills, I should say. So, for instance, my side, it's not really a gig because I don't get paid for it, but my side thing that I do is I actually am a filmmaker, and
Oh,
I write and direct movies and produce. So there's a lot of skills in that too. Should I even bother to put that,
oh
or
yes. I think so. It's like hobbies in general, either if they're a conversation topic, like it's something people would note, or it's something that has transferable skills, I think that's worth listing. You could do another section that is like external activities or extracurriculars or something like that.
okay?
Or you could just say like outside of work or something along those lines and list that it's filmmaking and a couple bullet points about what are some of the main portions of it. I think that would be a great conversation piece too.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions, Kay. I love those. Excellent. Oh, additional skills. Yes, additional skills could also be a great title for that. That is a really good point. Excellent. Good. Well, continue, ask any questions as you get them. Like I said, raise your hand right in the comments, but I will dive into LinkedIn. I will include my LinkedIn in the chat at the end. Feel free to add me. Everyone, you are welcome to copy what is on my profile, use that as a template. I would love to, I'd be honored to have a hand in helping you with developing your LinkedIn. So I'm going to go through some of the main sections that is based on the algorithm, the way the LinkedIn algorithm works. So the first is your headline. And the way I'm talking about the algorithm is the recruiter view on LinkedIn. They have certain filters they can do to find applicants. So you want to make sure that your profile is easily found and it's getting to the right places, both for searches and recruiter side. So the first is the headline. This is the term right underneath your name. Usually, if you haven't edited it, it's just your job title and where you work currently. So what you want to do is list your ideal job title, a keyword, and either another keyword or something like I help X achieve X by doing X. So an example could be account executive. These two should be a combination of either hard skills that are relevant or a soft skill that's unique to you. So data visualization, external stakeholder development. I help clients increase revenue through strategic software adoption. So sometimes the sentence at the end is hard to do based on your industry. So I personally don't have one of those, but that is the general kind of like sauce of how you make a headline. If you're struggling with it, don't be afraid to use like a ChatGPT and say, I want to do something along these lines of this information in this format. Give me some options. And some of them are not great. Some of them are decent. So take your hand at that as well. The about section is the next one that is very helpful, especially if you're pivoting industries. This is more important than ever if you are pivoting. So you want to start it with a hook because as you see in about sections, it shows you the first 2 to 3 lines. Then you have to click read more. You want them to read more. If it's super boring at the start, they will just skip right past it. But you can do a hook, and typically that is either like a detail about you, a statistic, kind of a mic drop statement. So I've seen people say like, did you know that, or I'm trying to think of an example. If you are like a math genius, you can say, I have been a math genius since the age of 4, and now I do it as my career. Let me tell you more. It could be, did you know that? I think mine is something like 97% of job seekers say that they are unhappy with the process or something along those lines. So it could be anything. I've asked ChatGPT a ton of times to develop different hooks, and it's great at that. So that's another one you can ask, but a hook, then a little description of your job experience, what you've done, your unique skills and values, what you're bringing to the table. Especially this is good for soft skills that you can't classically list on your resume. It's kind of awkward. Things like you're able to build rapport with other people quickly. You are an incredibly fast learner and are able to then quickly turn around and train others. You are an amazing mentor. Maybe you've received like exceeds expectations on every performance review you've ever gotten, as well as performance bonuses. Whatever might be relevant that you couldn't list in your resume, that's a great spot to put it in. Then you want to list jobs of interest. If you are laid off or you are actively job searching unabashedly, you can be very obvious about this. You can say, I'm actively seeking the following types of roles in the DC area. And that will at least help them to pop up on your profile to show those jobs of interest if recruiters are looking. So part of it is that you just want to make sure the keyword is on there. If you are currently employed and you don't want to be obvious, just don't list this part. Just keep the rest. If anyone asks why you're updating your LinkedIn, you can say, listen, I attended a session and I realized my LinkedIn was old. I had to go and take care of it. So it was about time. No one can question that. So don't be alarmed if you're worried about changing your LinkedIn. There's always an excuse. And then lastly is a call to action. So at the end, that is where you say, think I could be a good resource for you and your company. Let's connect. And then list your email address again. Even if it's already on your profile, you want to be as easily contactable as possible when you are actively job searching. So that's why you should drop it at the bottom. If you are still employed, you could say like, think I could be a helpful collaborator. Let's connect. Or like, do my skills seem like something that would be beneficial? Let's connect. So it can be kind of vague if you're actively employed. And like I mentioned, incorporate keywords to ensure the algorithm works for you. So that's the about section. This is the hardest part. It's like the cover letter of a LinkedIn. So if you're trying to knock out some stuff quick, focus on the other sections, then go back to about section. You know, you can always return. So next is skills and keywords. So on the skills section of LinkedIn, you can have up to 100 skills, and a lot of recruiters are searching based on those skills. If you've ever job searched on LinkedIn, you'll often see a company say you fit 3 out of the 9 skills listed for this position. Some of them are so basic, you're thinking, why would I list that on my profile? But if you're seeing it over and over, something like time management, just make sure it's on your profile. Make sure all the basic technologies, Microsoft Office Suite, Zoom, that they're all included. And then on LinkedIn, your skills section often can include some soft skills too. It's not just technology. So make sure that you are really using that section. If you have 22 skills, you need to add more, I promise you. If you're wondering where to start, look at some job descriptions on LinkedIn, see if they list the skills. If not, again, either highlight some keywords or plug it into ChatGPT and say, out of these 5 job descriptions, what are the core skills that I should list in my LinkedIn? And just see what it's pulling out. So that's one other section. The next thing you should do is engage with industry content. If you have any companies of interest, especially, they don't have job postings, but you've always wanted to work at Microsoft, it's always been your dream, you should make sure to be very active on their page. The recruiters notice if you're someone that consistently is liking, commenting, reposting on their content, they'll take note. So that's good to do if there's someone you want to play the long game with. Make sure that they're aware that you exist. The other is just to show recruiters that you're active on LinkedIn, and the more activity you have, the more you're showing up in searches. So even if you are afraid to post your own content, that's okay. You just need to like people's content, repost, especially repost with thoughts, where you're like, check out this awesome article posted by Microsoft. So it can just be something minor, but repost with comments, comment on post. If you want to publish your own content, it could either be an article, it could be a question. There's a poll option on LinkedIn. People love interacting with a poll. It could be like, hey, who is utilizing AI in their job search or something random. But any of those, you could post an article that you found separately from like off LinkedIn, but there's a lot of different ways you can publish. But I would say like, repost, or comment at least 1 to 2 times a week. Posting your own content, even if it's just like a repost with more like commentary, should be like once every 2 weeks or so, just as you're getting started. If you want to be really up and up about it, feel free to do more. That's kind of the baseline you should keep. And then build a private sector network. I know from working with government contacts that there is a ton of, you have only government contacts. That's your entire network. And that's completely fine. That's most people's positioning. So to build it up, the ideal number, and this will take a minute, is 300 plus connections. That means that your profile is coming up more when you're being searched for, you have more second degree connections. That's the sweet spot to make sure the algorithm is working for you. If you're at 22 connections, that's again completely fine. I would recommend going through and adding people you currently work with, past people you worked with, coworkers, people you supervised, friends, neighbors, places you volunteered with, people on this call for 40 plus. Make sure you're just connecting with those folks. As long as your profile includes what you're looking for, you can usually send a connection and no message and people will accept, as long as your profile is built out and it makes sense why you're reaching out. I have noticed if you're trying to make new Kohl's connections, people have been known to get scared if you write a custom message. I don't know why, but I've noticed the trend the past like 2 to 3 years. People get stressed that you're reaching out. So I recommend having a profile that makes sense. You've already refined it. You do a connection, no comment, and just let them accept it. Once they accept, then you can shoot them a message to say like, hey, your background is so impressive. I'd love to pick your brain sometime in the next 2 weeks if you're open to it. So if you have an ask for them, wait until after to actually do the ask. If you're just doing a general like connection, you could say like, hey, like saw we both do this, would love to connect. Keep it broad. That's fine. But just know if you're not seeing a lot of movement and you're doing a custom message, that might be the problem. So something, a little tidbit to keep in mind. And then ask for recommendations. There's a part of your profile, if it's not currently there, it's a section you need to add in, where these are recommendations that live on your profile forever. You need to be actively connected to them on LinkedIn to ask for a recommendation. So this can be, again, supervisors, coworkers, people you supervised, classmates, it can be anyone. And just if you write them a message and say, hey, like, I'm finally updating my LinkedIn. I loved our time working together. Would you mind writing 1 to 2 quick sentences on my profile? It's really easy. They give an automatic box where they can then just type it and send it in. And again, this lives on your profile forever. So it's almost better than references in some ways. You'll need both regardless, but it lives on your profile. It gives you a good first impression. So I recommend doing that. Even just work together with your coworkers and say, hey, let's write each other recommendations. That's fine. So that's another section I recommend. So before I move on from LinkedIn, I know that was a lot of content. I just want to make sure you get all the meat here. So are there any questions on LinkedIn that I can answer? Okay, excellent. And like I mentioned, I'll include my profile at the end. Feel free to connect with me. If you just search my name, you'll find me. It's like a pink background, so feel free. So applicant tracking system, I promised I was going to come back to it, and here we are. So this is what you're constantly hearing. My resume is getting kicked out because of ATS. That is an applicant tracking system. So this is a software used by hiring managers to search for resumes with specific keywords related to a job description. So most companies use it, but smaller NGOs, things like that, they have it, but they don't use it as the like end all be all. It said this applicant's the only one that works. I'm going to listen. It's usually the bigger companies that are getting thousands, like 400 to 1,000 applications for one job. They physically cannot go through those all. So they use this system. You'll see this is kind of the general distribution of it. So there's a lot of greenhouse. I'm sure you've seen Workday or Bamboo HR. You'll know what it is if you're applying to something and there is a URL on that company website like workday.boozallen.com. That's how you'll know which one. But essentially, it collects applications and it ranks candidates based on scanned relevant keywords and filters out resumes that don't knock out the requirements set by the hiring manager. So it can even be simple things like you wrote BS instead of Bachelor of Science. If they're not looking for BS, then your application doesn't go through. If they're looking for a specific job title that you had experience in and it's not there, that could be the reason. If they say they want 12 years of experience and yours shows kind of it separated out a little bit and it doesn't process its 12 years, that could kick you out. So it's some little things, but those could happen. So that's why it's important to use a lot of keywords throughout your resume. So even just replicating the verbs they're using, any technology they're listing, even if it's like that they're using external stakeholders instead of candidates, list external stakeholders. So it's a lot of times just replicating their wording. 98.4% of Fortune 500 companies use ATS, so that's why it's extra important to be relevant. And like I mentioned before, it cannot read 2-column resumes. There is something that's called a 2-column cover letter. That doesn't matter. The system is only really scanning the applications with the resumes. And cover letters, they'll typically go look through all the resumes, they'll say which ones they like, then they'll look at the cover letters. So ATS doesn't really care as much about the cover letter part. Plus, that is an optional feature for some jobs. But if it's optional, always do it anyway. It shows you took the extra effort. But just know this is what ATS looks like. But there is a ton of, like I said, AI tools to get through this system. So the first one, jobscan.co, this is a website I love. You get 5 free scans before they have you pay for it. But I think it's like $75 for 3 months. So if you're doing a lot of job search, I think it's worth it for 3 months. So this, you essentially enter in the job description, you upload your resume. If you have a premium account, you also can do LinkedIn and cover letters, and it will compare it to the job description and say, okay, you're missing these core things that are in the job description and they are not in your resume. And it will tell you what percentage you need to get to, like 75 to 85% match means you're good to go. You can apply. So I had one candidate that started using JobScan and she was getting interviews left and right. Before that, absolute silence. So it really can be a make or break. And it is .co, not .com, just so you know. And this is what it looks like. So that's one I definitely recommend. So you can run your resume through that. There's also tools like ChatGPT, like I said, that pull keywords out of a job description and can do things like rephrase your resume to better fit a job requirement, start a cover letter draft, especially for some of those resume bullet points that are really long and you think, I have no idea how to shorten this. Use ChatGPT. I will say, grain of salt. Sometimes it oversimplifies something and it fully takes out the core details you needed. So just know, don't just do it verbatim, but it is a good tool to readjust your materials. And ChatGPT is 100% free. But if you do a lot of files in one day, sometimes it gives you a limit. So that's just one thing to note. And like I mentioned, for some of these, this is just in general good to know, especially for federal government. Some of you may have security clearances. So just make sure it can accidentally disclose sensitive content because it's not all knowing. So make sure do not include any of these things. If you are using it with your full resume, your full cover letter, just make sure to take out, like, especially if there's any private information, just remove that. And that's a good practice regardless. You don't want to be sharing that with private sector anyway. So just keep that in mind. Oh, question about if cover letters are still required. It depends on the company. Small companies, NGOs, or mid-sized companies, they typically ask for a cover letter. If it's a large company, especially tech, they typically don't ask for one, but sometimes make it optional. So, like I said before, even if it's optional, do it anyway. It's a pain. No one likes writing a cover letter, but I promise it shows that you did the extra mile. The applicants taking the easy way out, they won't do it. So you already stand out more. But that is a great question. So any questions on AI to get through ATS? Okay. And I have a ChatGPT tip sheet that I'll share when I'm giving out this info later, just so you have an idea of some prompts you can use. So skill gaps and upskilling. So this is the piece that a lot of federal employees are worried about. They've been a Fed for so long. There's just certain things in private sector you've had no experience in. So some common ones I see is some software like Salesforce, Tableau, some data visualization, external stakeholder management. In the government, a lot of times you're just working with other feds. Cloud computing or budgeting. So depending on your position, you may have done some of these, but not always. Oh, okay. Good question about security clearances, actually. So going back to that for resumes, I actually do suggest listing if you have a security clearance. Even if the job doesn't require it, I usually just put it at the top next to like where you live, your phone number, email, LinkedIn, list your security clearance because sometimes that can be the reason you get a job over another applicant. Because they love if you already have one. They don't have to pay for it, they don't have to wait. So do list it even if the job doesn't require it. If you're listing all the GS levels, only do it once at the top. If you work for an agency that uses like CG or something else, just make sure you say it's equivalent to a GS, whatever. They don't know what the other ones mean. So, but I do suggest include your security clearance. That looks really good. And that was a good question. So going back to this, common skill gaps, like I mentioned, here are a couple. How you can develop them. You don't always need a full-blown certification. I would suggest before you really heavily pursue additional skill gaps, do informational interviews first. That is just essentially networking with an agenda. So you can reach out to people on LinkedIn that you already know, people you don't know, and say, hey, I am so impressed with your career. I'm actually hoping to transition into something similar. Would you mind scheduling a quick 30-minute Zoom call so I can ask you a few questions? And in that, you are doing your research and they just get to talk about themselves, but you can say like, what are the core technologies you're using every day? What are the main things you look for if you were hiring a person in this position on the resume? Are there specific skills, experiences, technologies, exposure to X environment? So then you can get an idea of like, oh, it sounds over and over like I need Salesforce. It is continuously being mentioned. So do some research with a couple informational interviews first. And if you're hearing the same thing over and over, then you can dive into either an online course or a certification. If you're doing something like project management, that is more so where you're going to be looking at a formal certification. If it's something like exposure to Salesforce, it could be like minor budgeting, event planning, data visualization. Those typically you can do just a quick online course, either super cheap or free. So online courses, like I said, Salesforce, unless you're the administrator, you don't need to know that much in depth. So platforms like Coursera, Udemy, edX, Google, LinkedIn Learning all have courses. I do a ton of Udemy. That's where I get a lot of my courses. So even if you're just thinking, I don't know that much about Excel, I don't want to look stupid, there's an Excel class. So feel free to do those. They're all online. And then certifications, like I mentioned, that could be like local and online universities. There's a ton in this area, especially in the DMV. There's like a million different colleges here. So any of those or online. There's also things like the PMP, Agile or Scrum Master, Six Sigma, AWS. Those are all common certifications I see. PMP takes a minute. So if you are really looking for a fast project management certification, I am going to recommend something called the PRINCE2, like Prince as in a Prince number 2. It is the best one to get it done quickly. I was able to study for it and pass the test within 2 weeks while working full time. So if you need a project management certification quickly, do that one. It is easier. And there is a Udemy course for $15 on it. So it is a bang for your buck there. And then lastly, so if you are still currently employed, that is a good place to leverage this. So you can try to incorporate either new projects or assignments to develop certain skills at work. And it doesn't have to be something like using professional development funds. I know a lot of those are frozen right now. So it could just be like, hey, let me work on mentoring some of the newer staff. Or it could be like, hey, these SOPs are so outdated. Could I just do a project on updating all of them? It could be, hey, I would love to support your next executive reporting. Could I help you work on the report? So it can be a variety of things, but try to develop it at work whenever possible. So utilize your time in that position as wisely as you can. If you're not working, then any of these will also suffice. And then next, resources for job market research. So as you're searching, one thing I think is extra relevant since there is a lot of changes that are affecting the private sector, like DEI jobs are sometimes being entirely removed. What is it? The automotive industry is also struggling with some of the supply chain and tariffs that are coming up. So there are some things you can check. There is a site called layoffs.fyi that shows you any of the upcoming layoffs that are currently happening. So that's a good place to check before you apply somewhere, especially a larger company, just because you don't know. The next is there's something called the Workforce Network's Rapid Response Program called WARN. So it's a WARN notice and it's state specific. This requires every employer with 100 plus employees to provide 60 calendar days notice of planned closings and mass layoffs. A lot of times they notify the state before they even tell their employees. So if you're ever curious, if you look up WARN Act or WARN notice, whatever state you're in, you can see the list of people that have submitted layoff requests. So just something to keep in mind. There's some industry specific job boards. There are still jobs that would love to have your clearance if you have one. So there's clearance jobs, clearjobs.net. LinkedIn jobs and Indeed are usually the two I lean on the most. Indeed is general and same with LinkedIn, but I have noted that Indeed tends to get jobs like 3 days earlier than other platforms. So even though I hate the dashboard of what it looks like on Indeed, it is getting jobs sooner. LinkedIn I like because you can see if alums work there, if you know anyone that works there. So it's just more in general, I think easier to parse through. Lastly, Google Jobs. That is one people sleep on a lot. If you just looked up like project manager jobs, there's a section that looks like this when you search for it. And then you can do more additional filters, but it pulls from every single job website, not just Google itself or LinkedIn. It's pulling from some weird kind of job boards and things like that. So it can give you some more options there and you can set up job alerts for yourself. So that's one I would also recommend looking at. I also listed some government transition resources. There are a ton. All of the state governments are typically doing some either stipends or some specific job boards and resources. So depending on your state, look at that as well. I know Virginia, Maryland, and DC are doing something related to that. So look there as well. But these are some resources I'll also include in the handout, but they include ways that you can translate language, job boards, things like that. So make sure to check that out. And that is it. I know that was a mouthful, a lot of info, but I promise this will just give you a nice encapsulation of all the stuff you need to know. So feel free to go to my website, email me, text or call me, add me on LinkedIn. This is a QR code. I'll put the link in the chat to a free 30-minute consultation. So if you want to discuss your situation in more depth, feel free to go ahead and schedule that. So I am going to briefly exit this just so I can show you my specific links right here. So here is all of my links. So I'm going to stop share and then open the floor to questions. So feel free.
Yeah, you said earlier that you could help out specifically with LinkedIn because I have a question about LinkedIn. I find it hard, maybe I'm showing my age, but I find it hard to manage in terms of what I wanted to do, which is to represent three different identities, if you will, because it seems to be to lock in solely on one identity. So if I just have my name, right? But then I'm doing something else that's not related, it won't let me create another LinkedIn profile. Is that something you could help with?
Yes. So what that will look like for you is you technically can only create one personal profile, but you can also create a business profile. So I could help you with navigating that. Or the other option is that we figure out how to create a cohesive narrative around the three sections you're talking about so that you can list them all on your personal profile, but we kind of tell it as a story. So it doesn't seem as separate. But if you want to do something like filmmaking separately, that would
Yes.
definitely warrant a business LinkedIn profile, which is very easy to create. That's something I could definitely help with.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Great question. Perfect. Any other questions, folks? Oh, good question, Joanna. So federal government exempt from posting more notices, yes. Because it's more private information, they don't actually get to post it. And since it's federal government, but if it's state government, I think technically they have to post it, state or local. So it's mostly private sector companies to use the WARN notices for, unfortunately. If any of you are waiting on RIF notices, what I have heard is that it's probably going to be May 15th that folks are finding out, if not a little sooner. So if you're waiting on that, that's kind of the deadline there. So I foresee a rise in people job searching around mid-May, and then end of September and end of December. That is when the rest of the DRP folks are leaving at the end. So just keep in mind, those are when I foresee a surge in the DC market job search. Excellent. Okay, well, I will wait a couple minutes in case anyone has other questions, but thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I hope to see you next week on the 31st. I will be sending out all of these resources to all of you afterwards, but do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and thank you so much again. Have a great night.